Hello, I'm Robert, and just a bit more background to this post I did to Doomsday Debunked. I might help with others as well. So it's something we have quite common in our society. People who think that religion in some way is illogical, doesn't make a lot of sense. And there's a kind of intolerance of religious folk by non-religious folk. And we really have no problems in our group between the different religions. The issues we get from time to time are the non-religious people who are telling religious people to stop being religious. When the religious people have various problems in their religion, then they say, well, you can solve all those problems just by not being religious anymore. And that's not a helpful thing to say if it's their faith. But the other thing is, you see, that non-religion is a faith as well. There isn't actually any scientific evidence. You can't solve it in that way. And so I thought I'd talk a little bit about how these various non-religious faiths. I mean, one of the most striking for me is transhumanism and the idea that human brain is a computer program. There's no scientific evidence for that. None at all. Not even the slightest bit. Nobody has found even a single logical gate, like the AND, NAND, OR, NOR, XOR, that make up a computer. And they just can't be found in the human brain. There's nothing there that does logic at a fundamental level. There's nothing there that adds or multiplies. There are no bits, like on and off bits, like you have in a computer. We could store a 1 or a 0. Nobody knows how memories are stored, how images are stored in our brains. There's nothing even resembles that. There are no little bits or instructions, that nobody has found a single instruction in a brain. And yet, for these people who have this faith that what I am is a computer program, even though nobody's ever found instruction, nobody's ever even found any logical gate, and then they have this faith that in the future scientists will prove this and find a way to upload this computer program that they think I am into a computer and just be executed and be computable. And there's absolutely no evidence for that at all. Not even the slightest. Not even the beginning of a hint of that. Not even the slightest hint that any of that is true. So, to my mind, that is as much of faith as believing in God. You have no evidence. Some religious people say there's far more evidence for God than there is for this. And now, if you go and read something like Richard Dawkins' book, then you may come away from it if you have atheist inclinations, saying, "Oh, he's proved there isn't a God." If you come there as with religious background, having studied theology, and you look at it, you think, "What idiotic ideas? Has he never studied any theology?" So it all depends where you're coming from. I don't think he has studied much theology or philosophy, and it just doesn't show any sign of understanding really where theology comes from. And so that's the so then you get people who have these very strange religious ideas, which they don't even think of as religion. They think that when you die, then you experience blackness forever. And they claim that that is non-religious. That is a very weird religion spread over the internet. Because if you think about it, if when you die, that's it, there's going to be nothing that remembers that you died. There can't be. There's nothing knows it died. To try and think about it a bit more clearly, then imagine that you are hit and you have a car accident, and the two possible outcomes. One is that a couple of weeks later, eventually, after being very seriously ill, and then you're just completely unconscious, you wake up, and then you don't remember the last few minutes before the car accident, because you haven't had time to lay down your memories. Just like when you go to sleep, you don't remember the last few minutes before you go to sleep. So you won't remember the accident. And then you wake up. The other possibility is that you have the car accident and you die. then if when you die that's it, then basically your life stopped before the car accident. There were some more experiences after that, but they weren't remembered. And so if there's nothing left to remember that life, then that life ended before the accident, effectively. And so this idea that, if you have this idea that you, that having died, then you just experience blackness, that is suggesting that there's some kind of weird afterlife, that something continued, and this something that continued then experienced blackness. If you can experience blackness, you can experience other things. Why only blackness? And then it can go on to another life. Maybe in another realm, if you start thinking like that, then you're opening your mind to the possibility of some kind of afterlife or another existence. And this can actually help if you're non-religious. So I'm not trying to persuade anyone who's non-religious to be religious. So I'll just say that clear before I go any. So I'm not saying that, I'm just saying this can give you some appreciation of religion if you're non-religious. So if you take that kind of rather strange argument that it mightn't work or it might work for you, but it might just give you a little chink of thinking a little bit of understanding religion. And that is, if you then ask, okay, so after you've died, there's nothing left that remembers that. There can't be. Not if you think that when you die that's it. Then after your life is over, there's nothing left. Nothing ever according to this super scientific belief, there's nothing that ever knows that it has died. You can never have the experience or knowledge of having died if you take this super scientific belief. So therefore, if after I've died, there's nothing left that knew that this life ever happened, in what sense is this life happening now? If after I die, there's nothing that ever lived, that ever had this experience, and that had this life, then in what sense is it happening now? So, just something to think about. And I'm not saying you can answer that, but just give it a little bit of thought, and then that might just give you a little bit of appreciation of religion and the idea that some people have that something may continue after this life. So that's that strange idea, and I've talked about so what I want to talk about in a little bit more detail. This is what I was going to talk about. So the mental health thing. So there's this research by psychologists, and it suggests that the mental health, it's called mental health of the atheists and the nuns, this is called. So there's strong evidence that being religious is very protective and with much lower rates of depression, anxiety, suicide, self-harm and substance use. But there's also, and then there used to be, and then there's the idea that if you don't have this, what can replace this protective mental health protection of religiosity? And so then it turns out that the strong atheism of the likes of Richard Dawkins is also protective of mental health. Now, I don't think it's just that. I think also, like humanists, for instance, who may not have strong atheist ideas, you don't have to be atheist. So, I don't believe in God. I don't have belief in God. I'm a Buddhist. For me, it's just not relevant to me whether it's not relevant to my path. So I'm not an agnostic. I'm not an atheist. Just non-theist. So non-theist means it's not relevant to your path. So a lot of people, I think, are more non-theist. It's not important to them. So if you're a humanist, you could be a non-theist humanist, where it just isn't relevant to your path. You don't need to make a decision about whether God exists or doesn't exist, or even whether you don't know. And maybe some confusions could be like that too, I don't know. But anyway, so that also, as long as you've got a strong path that you're following, I think that would also be, many people are humanists, and of course Buddhists, they're strong, good mental health, Sure, it must be, surely. I don't know, I have to look up any studies, but yeah. So, so I think it's much more having a certainty of belief, or I don't think it even needs to be a certainty of belief. So in the Buddhist path, then we're encouraged to just not know. So you to recognize what you don't know. That is not that you've got to not know things that you do know, but to recognize what you don't know, and not to try to put your faith in things you don't know. And so, so that's a path, but you have a very strong faith that you're following. I've taken refuge in the Buddha, and I'm following the path of the Buddha. And this is the path of this not knowing, recognizing what you don't know. So that you have a certainty, not so much in the belief as in the path, and a faith that this is a valuable path to follow, and it leads eventually to awakening, and that it's beneficial to all beings to follow this path. So the certainty of path, I think, might be a better way of putting this than certainty of belief. So that's certainly very good for your mental health, I'm sure. So that could be interesting for psychologists to look into that, as to whether it's certainty of path rather than certainty of belief. Anyway, that's my belief. That's my hypothesis, scientific hypothesis, that it's certainty of path. It's really what we're talking about here. That you found your path that works for you, whatever it is, religious, non-religious, whatever. So those are the main points. So I've got a few things up here. I'll just quickly talk. Oh yes, so I want to talk a little bit more about this whole computer idea, but I've already given videos about it before. I don't want this to be too long, but I say it very briefly. So this whole idea that because it's just so many people think, we are computer programs, and as I said, there's nothing in the brain that even remotely gives you even the slightest scientific basis for assuming that we are. There's not even the remotest suggestion that we are. There's no evidence. Completely faith. It's totally faith-based. Well, Roger Penrose, he is very very clear that in his belief, not as a result of his research and his logical arguments, then he thinks that what we do is non-computable. So if you understand truth in a mathematical sense, then there can't be anything there then it can't be encoded in a computer program. So I'm not going to go through his argument, just talk very roughly about the idea. So the idea is that what we have, you could say, it isn't actually, well, I'm just going to talk about I'll talk about one other thing first. So get people saying, it's not a computer program, it's a neural net. And they just use this term neural net as if that solves everything. So I'm just going to say, suppose you want to go to Google and search for school bus. And this is you interacting with a neural net. Let's see. So now we go to Google Images. And this is the Google Images neural net. And it classifies all these things as school buses. Now if you're in the US, you say, oh yes, of course, that's a school bus. But if you're in Europe, or almost anywhere else, I would imagine, you say, why are they all yellow and black? Because the buses aren't yellow and black in Europe. Well, for some reason, it's probably been excessively trained on US buses. And the Google image search engine, it just doesn't recognize normal buses that aren't yellow and black in Europe as being school buses, not very well. The page is completely full with yellow and black buses. The entire page, I haven't yet come across a non-yellow and black bus. See? And there, that's the first one. There's a school bus in Europe. It's usually biased towards the American buses. There's another white one. But really, you want to have a caption or something or other. Look, see, it says school bus in the caption, so it can get from that it's a school bus. But apart from that, and school bus, so it's got to have either school bus in the title, or it's got to be yellow and black. That seems to be basically what its thing. Right. So now, if you wanted to try and find out why is this neural net classifying, requiring school buses to be yellow and black, there's nothing there I can tell you. It was just trained on lots and lots of school buses. And it doesn't even, a neural net doesn't even have a memory. You can't ask it, please tell me what are the school buses, because all that data is gone. The way they train a school bus, they put these images through, the images are gone, and all they're left are neural weights. Now, our brains obviously don't work like that. We remember the things we've seen, and we can reason about them, and we're logical, and we can think about them, and even an animal, it isn't constantly just saying, oh, jump, 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 just sort of totally intuitively. It reasons, it does, it's obviously is thinking. You can see animals thinking and making decisions. And the people who think, another thing that kind of throws a span in the works, an idea that the brain is a neural net, is that it doesn't explain amoebas. So if you scroll further down this page, and you look at amoebas' behaviour, let's see if I can do a search. Here we are. So here's an amoeba, let's just play that. So you see this little creature, let's turn this up, and you can see it, and as I'll talk as it's doing it, you see it, it's sort of going around doing things, interacting, it eats things, it interacts with other creatures, and it's going around doing all sorts of stuff, and you can find it searching for food, and eating and rejecting food in this one. Let's have them both going at once. Again, without food, without sound. See these little creatures that do all sorts of things, and these don't have neural nets. They're just behaving by themselves without a neural net, because they don't have even one neuron. Look, there's one catching a little thing and eating it. I'm going to try to eat it. I think it does eventually. Oh, that little thing is wandering around, it's making decisions and going about. No, I didn't. Anyway, there's a video of it eating something eventually. Anyway, all that behaviour that you see that's going on, then that does not use a neural net, because there are no neurons, and an amoeba doesn't have a single neuron. And if they can't explain an amoeba, how can they explain a human being? And so anyway, he thinks that possibly it's due to they're very funny amoebas, and they are neurons and so on. They have these little structures inside them, which are like skeletons, but they're constantly dissolving and reforming within microseconds. And on the surface of these microtubules, as they're called, are these patterns which could be used for thinking. So, but Roger Penrose he's an expert in quantum gravity, and he thinks that what's going on in the brain is there's both the quantum effects, there's also the very grainy, if you are working in quantum gravity, one of the possible ideas is that the curvature of space-time is just, that's just a very big, large-scale thing, but on tiny level within your brain, within everything, this kind of graininess to space-time. And this graininess could be something that our brains are exploiting in order to non-computable ways of thinking. And that's extremely subtle and very difficult to measure if that's going on. Now that's just an hypothesis, and so, but there's lots of physics still to be discovered, and loads of things we don't understand. And who knows if he's right or not? Just an idea. But just to kind of open up this idea that maybe there are things going on in our brains that we just don't know about, because we haven't got the science yet. and we have no idea how beavers think. Don't think anyone's got a clue about that yet, really. And so once you start thinking about that, it becomes much more plausible, this idea that what we're doing may be just, for whatever reason, non-computable. It just can't be done in a computer program. There are loads of things in nature that we can't put into computers exactly. And the simplest example is radioactive decay. So, for instance, radium decays to radon, throwing off an alpha particle. If you take a single radium atom, what I'm explaining, yes, I missed out that bit of explanation. So the way we think, if it's non-computable, then that means you can't do it with a finite number of symbols, with a finite number of instructions. So there just isn't any script going along in our brain in any finite language. It just can't be encoded in that way. It doesn't mean that we are in some way infinite and we're running an infinite program with infinite many variables and infinite many symbols. What it means is that it just can't be done that way at all. So an example of that would be, but technically what it means is that you need infinitely many symbols if you were to try to do it as a computer program. So in the same way, if you look at radioactive decay as a very simple example of something that would need infinitely many symbols if you were to try to do it as a computer program. So if you look at a radium atom and wait for it to decay into radon, throwing off an alpha particle, you have no idea when it's going to happen. And it's built into the fundamentals of our physics that you just don't know when it's going to happen. So you just sit and watch, and eventually, maybe now, maybe 1,000 years from now, maybe 1 billion years from now, it suddenly throws off an alpha particle in some random direction and turns into radon. And a whole series of other reactions usually happen very quickly. Well, if you want to encode that in some way, you would have to write in every single radium decay as it happens. And it's no use for predicting it. So, in that sense, you can't make a computer program to model even a single radium atom. You can, in a way, you can just say, you just have, but you can't do the randomness. There always will be your computer program. Maybe it has a delay, and you say, wait 1 billion years and then decay. But that's not the way radium does it. It's got a hidden variable that you put into it in the computer program, so you haven't modelled it exactly. You just can't model it. Any way of modelling it is a kind of cheat, unless you use random motion of air molecules and use that to kind of trigger it, and then that is a sort of randomness, but you've got the randomness from outside your computer program, and it's not the way radium is doing it. So you can't really model it. You can only kind of take some source of randomness and try and feed that into your computer program and use that to try and model it. It's not the same thing. So, in the same way, it's entirely possible that it just is not possible to model what a human brain does as a computer program. So, it's not just that it isn't a computer program. You couldn't simulate an entire human brain or entire body in a computer program. It just can't be done. That is entirely possible. There's no reason why it has to be possible. And we're certainly nowhere even remotely near that. We're nowhere near anything like being able to do anything like that. So again, if you think that what we have here is in some way can be simulated in a computer program, that's the faith, complete faith. There's absolutely zero evidence. Zero evidence, no evidence at all. And does that cover the main things? So, yes, and this is the Blue Brain project. So I talked about the neural nets and how what we do is not a neural. We can do reasoning and neural nets can't. And if you try and add reasoning to it, you've got to add things that we certainly don't have in our brains. And we do have something that is a bit like a neural net in our brain, in that we have all the neurons that are connected together, and we have things like edge detection in our retina, where, or in the retinal processing, where you notice the edges of things, and it seems that, and you can kind of simulate what our eyes do and how the bit of brain immediately behind that does, using neural nets. But the way we do it is not like that. We don't have anything resembling what you have in a computer neural net. We don't. The neurons in the human brain don't work like the artificial neurons in a neural net. And nobody really knows how they work. It's just not understood. You get these little bursts of electrical activity, but before we know, they're nothing to do with thinking. And then you get this chemical signalling, and as I said, there are no bits or bytes. There's nothing resembling logical operations. There's nothing even resembling the way that a node in a neural net works, in the way a neuron works. It's not like they've sort of worked out that if you put such and such a stimulus into a neuron, it'll put such and such ones out, and that there'll be a training inside, and it changes just the way a neural net does, and you've got to train it in the same kind of way. It's more that they've taken an analogy and said, oh well, it's all connected together a bit like a neural net, we'll make something a bit like that, and then using that as an analogy and sort of a lot of guesswork and hunches and so on, they come up with this thing which works very much like the way we do, but it can't be identical. It's not the same thing really. Anyway, so these people with this neural net idea built this Blue Brain project. It was a big flop, a big flop in Europe. They spent $1 billion more than that, and it was very interesting. The main question is it's not helping to understand how the human brain itself works. There's some other amusing things. The project is impressive, but might leave people baffled as someone who spent a lot of time and effort building something that doesn't do anything. So they weren't actually trying to make something that works like the human brain, but they were trying to kind of, and the neurons, and Mark Crum would complain that these neurons aren't realistic enough, but throwing a ton of neurons together and approximately wiring them according to biology isn't going to bridge this gap. So that was what I was just saying. These neurons don't work like the neurons in our brain, but they just would try pushing together loads and loads of them to make this Blue Brain project and approximately wiring them, and somehow something is going to happen, and it doesn't. It just didn't happen. So this thing didn't behave like the human brain does. And then they're just saying, and they basically was wound down quite a bit and split up into different projects. They're doing quite interesting things, but they're not really trying to simulate how the human brain works. And then I want to go back to this. Ever since I was a child, and before that, and this is from 1950s, I think. This is when I bought you. If you want, you can watch this video, and 1 minute and 52 in. Let's go 1 minute 52 in, and he says he confidently expects. Let's just do that.
The thinking machine.
Yeah. So.
Hello again. With me tonight is
Let's look at 1 minute. Let's go forward a little bit.
Director of the Research Laboratory of Electronics at MIT.
Yeah. They're
That
very.
man isn't playing checkers against the computer, is he?
Sure, and it plays pretty well.
So this is back.
Now, which color?
While most computer scientists saw it as a mere number cruncher, a small group thought that the digital computer...
So you can see there that this is back, very naive back then, when I was a child, and not long after, and not long before, and just seeing someone playing checkers with a computer, and the computer was just doing numbers and things on, it did not even having to perceive the checkers board or anything. And this was just so impressive to them, long before anything like our AlphaGo or anything, or playing chess, just playing simple checkers. And 152 in, let's just look at it, 152 in, it's after the checkers, there he is, playing checkers. So this looks very naive to us now. I think our current people will seem just as naive in the future.
I confidently expect that within a matter of 10 or 15 years, something will emerge from the laboratories which is not too far from the robot of science fiction fame.
So there we are, way back then, whenever that is. I think it's the 1950s, early 1960s. And I think that we'll look back in about 2050 or 2100. They'll be looking back at the people now who are saying, oh, within a few years, within 15 years, we're going to have these robots that can think like human beings, thinking, and it'll just seem just as quaint to them as that seems to us now. So I don't see this happening ever myself, because I happen to think that Penrose is along the right lines here, and that just intuition, gut feelings, faith. It's this kind of faith thing too, really. You know, it's just the way that I'm very. You know, if someone can disprove it somehow, then of course. But I don't think that's going to happen myself. So that's basically it. What else do we have to look at? I'm just kind of tidying up the ends here. Is the life after death? So yes. So I'm going to give links to all these in the video description, and or you can watch this yourself, read this yourself. I've talked about this separately in a separate video. I don't want to go into any detail. I'm not trying to convince you of religious ideas, or to convince you that after you die that there is an afterlife. I'm just trying to say, just trying to help non-religious people to be a bit more respecting of people with religious ideas, and to realize that you have a faith too if you're non-religious. It's just your faith is different. You have a faith in atheism, you have a faith that when you die that's the end of this life, and you have faith in humanism, or there'll be something or other that's behind your life, that's helping you to live your life. And the main thing is, I think, having confidence in the path that you're following, whatever it is. It really doesn't matter what it is, and nobody knows. So I just have to keep that open, that nobody knows which of all these various ideologies is the correct one. And in that situation, it's perfectly okay just to say, oh well, my dad is a Christian, so I'm Christian. My mother's Christian, so I'm Christian, or Muslim. And that's as good a reason as any, really. You can do lots of reasoning, and you can think for ages and ages, and theologians and non-theologians have deep thinking and write long books. But in the end, it's just as rational to be any of these as any of the others. And you could be one of the people who does the thinking, or you could just be one of the people who just says, well, that seems okay to me, I'm going to go that way. Oh yes, I just said a little bit about, so for instance, quite a lot of our members are Catholic. And if you're a Catholic, then your belief is that it most likely is that God created you. And so a lot of people who are Catholic or Christian don't actually realise what their own belief is. So that God created you, and that God created you as a kind of child. So it doesn't mean that God is in control of you. So a lot of people go wrong there, and they think that God being creator means God's the controller. That's not the situation. If you're Christian and you believe in God, then you are the child. And as a child, you've got some Quakers say that of God in everyone, so they think like a child of God, and others think that it's like at least the qualities of God, like love and compassion and wisdom. Then He has given you a share of that, a connection of that, to be able to have this kind of vast love and compassion and wisdom. And that's really what the situation is. And then when you die and you lived a good life, then you're going to go to heaven. So for some Catholics, it's a very simple belief. They're God's child. They're living as good a life as they can. When they die, they're going to go to heaven. Then nobody can say you're wrong. If that's your belief, then stay with it. If that works for you, and there's no doubt that you live good lives, and it's good for your mental health to be a Catholic. And so, just whatever path you're on, just don't worry that you can't prove it or justify it to other people. And just follow your path. Because you can't prove it. You can try to prove it. You can think you've proven it, but all the people with the other ideologies and the other faith systems, they'll be proving their views in the same way, and none of them will accept your proof as a proof. And like Dawkins, proving is atheism, but it only works when atheists read him, and the other people just look and say, what an idiotic idea. He doesn't seem to have the first idea of theology. So, and it's the same with atheists looking at theology and so on. And the other people's ideas, if you're not familiar with them, then there's a great tendency to just kind of think, liking what you're familiar with, and just not giving the time of day and trying to get your mind into the mind space to understand the arguments of people with other different ideologies and backgrounds. But they're all equally valid. They've all got great thinkers, people who've spent their entire life thinking about these things. And honest, straightforward people, not deluding themselves, thinking it as clearly as they possibly can, with the utmost care, looking at the basic ideas of their religion or their belief system, just as carefully as Dawkins did with his atheism. And then they come to these conclusions, and they just see that it supports their belief system. Anyway, so I hope that helps. Right, if any of you are interested to join Doomsday Debunk, then to join the group, and we've got the if you go to the top of the group, you'll see the rules. So do please, when you join the group, read the rules and those guidelines, because they help to make the group work properly. And so I hope this is of interest to some of you in the group, and maybe some of you outside the group as well, just to understand. I thought some of these points might interest you. Just maybe see some of you in the group.